anti-reflux barriers like infradiaphragmatic location of distal esophagus. Usually there will be normally there will be positive intra-abdominal pressure, but in recumbency in the of the neonates and during crying there will be further increase in intra-abdominal pressure, and esophagus which is normally situated in a thoracic cavity, inspiratory negative pressures creates pressure gradient leads to GER. The second component is LES tone, which is perfectly except during deglutition. The third component is diaphragmatic sling, which occludes G junction during inspiration. Gastric fundus, which maintains compression over the distal esophagus, and distal rosettes of mucosal folds, which contributes to cardial closure. The additional anti-reflux mechanisms are the esophageal peristalsis. There are three types of esophageal peristalsis. The primary waves which run all along the esophagus. The secondary waves which occur when reflux, they do not necessarily involve the upper esophagus. And the tertiary waves with simultaneous and non-progressive contractions of the esophagus which unable to clear the lumen. The sphincters, the upper esophageal sphincter, which is a tonic permanent tonic closure which protects respiratory system from GER, and lower esophageal sphincter which maintains permanently closed except during deglutition. Coming to mechanism of physiological GER in newborns, there are three mechanisms. The most common one is transient LES relaxation. There will be relaxation of both lower esophageal sphincter and surrounding crura in transient LES relaxation. These are independent of swallowing and reduce LES pressure to less than 2 mm of mercury, and which lasts more 10 to 60 seconds. Normally in LES, the nadir LES pressure will be 7 to 8 mm of Hg, but in transient LES relaxation there will be less than 2 mm of Hg. Recording. Okay. In erect human, the gravity helps the esophageal clearance. When there is a food bolus in the esophagus, these salivary and esophageal secretions secrete, and along with the primary and secondary waves, it clears the esophagus. But in recumbent newborns, it is not possible. The shortness of intra-abdominal segment of the esophagus in newborns is the second mechanism of physiological GER, and the alleged immaturity of anti-reflux barrier also one of the cause. The infant reflux becomes evident in first few months of life. It peaks at 4 months and resolves up to 88% by 1 year, and nearly by 2 years almost it resolves. In infant's esophagus, it is around 8 to 10 centimeter. The intra-abdominal first 6 months after full term birth. The reflexed material has greater chance of extending to more proximal extent in preterm infants. So the differential diagnosis for GER will be the eosinophilic esophagitis, pyloric stenosis, intestinal obstruction secondary to malrotation with intermittent volvulus, infections, inborn errors of metabolism, and increased intracranial pressure. Coming to epidemiology, more than 1/3 of the normal newborns and young infants present with GE reflex. In that 1/3, around 1/5 of the infants take medical advice, and very few actually have GERD symptoms. So all the races and both genders are equally affected. Coming to genetics, the genetic locus is located in chromosome 13q14. There is high penetrance and autosomal dominant. Several members of the family may be affected by GERD phenotype, but this genetic involvement is not fully confirmed. Continue. Coming to clinical presentation and diagnosis, the physiological GER presents like regurgitation and vomiting, usually after feeds, and often it is partial. The pathological GER, they present with esophagitis symptoms like restlessness, nocturnal crying, arcing, choking, and which results in failure to thrive. The esophageal sufferance like refusal to feed, dystonia, and extreme irritability, and other symptoms like non-esophageal symptoms like repeated cough, recurrent atelectasis, pneumonia, difficulties for extubation in ventilated babies. The comorbidities in newborns and prematures. The severe respiratory tract disease leads to in premature children. There will be already delayed maturation of the anti-reflex barriers and recombinant position. The upper airway obstruction will be there, and the respiratory assistance with positive pressure, airway pressure, and along with NG tubes. So the GER is frequent and clinically relevant in premature babies. The microaspiration of gastric contents cause respiratory disease, and weaning off from the ventilator may be difficult until GER ceases. Coming to special situations like the GERD in neurologically impaired babies, there will be abnormal neuroenteric control, spasticity, constipation, which exaggerates GER driving pressure gradient. The LES pressure weakening will be there after brain injury. So, neurologically impaired babies respond poorly to medical treatment and often candidates for surgery. For nutritional support in neurologically impaired patients, gastrostomy is often indicated. Thus, GERD after treatment of esophageal atresia and TEF. So around 30 to 40% of the cases present with GERD after treatment of TEF repair. So the esophagus is structurally abnormal in these cases with extrinsic and intrinsic innervations are deficient. The hiatus and position of the GE junction are distorted as a consequences of repair or malformation, and the upper airway obstruction due to tracheomalacia or tracheobronchial stenosis. The innervation and function of the stomach are also abnormal. The anti-reflex barrier fails. The esophageal peristaltic pump scarcely operative. Here, in case the repeated atelectasis, pneumonia, chronic respiratory tract diseases may last for life. The recurrent anastomotic stenosis becomes refractory to dilatation, mostly due to peptic component. So the GER in TEF survivors almost constant in infancy and decreases over time. But few studies have shown that there is increased increase in the GER after TEF repair. The long-term complications of GER in TEF repairs will be the esophagitis, Barrett's esophagus, and esophageal cancer. Coming to GERD after CDH repair. After CDH repair, the children requiring ECMO with large hernias, they develop GERD. The GER is frequent during first years of life after the CDH repair, and which decreases gradually, but it persists beyond childhood in few cases and causes problems in around 50% of the cases. The severity of respiratory disease and difficulties for feeding are the indications for gastrostomy and fundoplication in case of CDH patients. What is the pathology behind GER in CDH cases? There will be hiatus is under tension after closure of diaphragmatic orifice or with prosthetic patch repair. The esophageal extrinsic and intrinsic innervations are abnormal. The small lung, because of small lung, flattened diaphragm, and tight abdominal closure, there will be exaggerate pressure gradient which facilitates GER, and gastric emptying is delayed. Small bowel is partially obstructed due to non or malrotation. Coming to GERD after treatment of anterior abdominal wall defects. These anterior abdominal wall defects are body wall is incomplete or abnormal. In omphalocele, the periumbilical wall is replaced by gelatinous sac which contains bowel and sometimes liver. In gastrous cases, the parietal orifice is located on the right side. In the vicinity of umbilical stalk, the bowel and sometimes other organs eviscerate through this. In both cases, abdominal space is reduced at birth, and post-operatively there is increased intra-abdominal pressure. The difficulties for re-establishing intestinal transit and constant presence of non-rotation or malrotation, which creates pressure environment in the intra-abdominal area, which causes GE reflux and hiatus hernia. The hiatus hernia is usually located very anterior or substernal region, which facilitate dysfunction of the anti-reflex mechanisms. The GER is transient in anterior-abdominal wall defects, which improves when intra-abdominal contents reaccommodate. So how to go ahead with these conditions? So there are some questionnaires like modified Ornstein infant GER questionnaires. So they ask questions again on how the baby usually split up. Is there any refusal of feeding, trouble in gaining weight, cry during after feeding, any hiccups, any history of arching, struggle to breathe. So based on this, they give points. The total score will be around 25. If the score is more than 7, we can diagnose GERD with a sensitivity of 74% and a specificity of 94%. So how to go ahead with management of physiological GER? The GER is frequent and benign, so invasive procedures should be avoided as much as possible. So when the child comes with suspecting GER, after proper history and physical examination, if warning signs and symptoms, this is at the physician level, where if the warning signs and symptoms are present, further evaluation should be done at and patient should be referred to specialist. If there are no warning signs, avoid overfeeding and thickening of feeding is advised and continue breastfeeding. If there is improvement, then continue management. If there is no improvement, consider 2 to 4 weeks of protein hydrolysate or acid formula and in breastfed infants, and eliminate cow's milk in maternal diet. So if there is improvement, continue same management. If there is no improvement, then refer to pediatric management of GER. How to manage this reassurance? There is no intervention required for most of the physiological GER cases. Effective parental reassurance is more than enough. Educating the parents regarding regurgitation and lifestyle changes, feeding changes, positioning, and avoiding environmental and maternal smoke exposure. The dietary measures will be like normalization techniques, overfeeding like in volumes and frequencies, in breastfed infants, withdrawal of the dairy products from mother's diet, and in infants, thickening of feeds with rice, corn, potato starch, or commercially thickened diet, which decreases frequency of regurgitation and emesis. But the side effects of these pre-thickened feeds are like weight gain and constipation. So even after all these changes, if there is no improvement, we can try with hypoallergenic formula like hydrolyzed or amino acid based formulas. The caution should be when managing with preterm infants, there is a possible association between the xanthan gum based thickened feeds and NEC. The caution using rice and cereal, which there is an increased risk of arsenic exposure. Both in formula feeds and solid feeds with rice, they are important sources of arsenic. Yes, sir. So coming to positioning measures, it is important in infants who cannot control their positions independently. The more reflex episodes in supine and side positions, but supine positions reduce the risk of infant death syndrome. So the recommendation is supine position during sleep, and when the child is awake, prone and upright position is advised. So when the child is in prone position or upright position, the gaseous content will come to the fundus and the liquid content will go to the pyloric region, and which avoids GER. The flat supine position and semi-seated positions in after postprandial period increases the GER, which are not advised. Coming to pharmacotherapy, The pharmacotherapy directed at ameliorating acidity of the gastric contents, promoting their arboreal movement. This pharmacotherapy should be considered only for symptomatic infants. Coming to histamine 2 receptor antagonists. Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Histamine 2 receptor antagonists. These are anti-secretory agents. Selective inhibition of histamine receptor on parietal cells. The definite benefit will be there in mild to moderate reflex esophagitis, which this H2 blockers requires dose adjustment in renal impairment. The side effects are like irritability, abnormal liver function test, and gynecomastia. The dosages in ranitidine is 5 to 10 mg per kg per day. In cimetidine 30 to 40, nizatidine 10 to 20, and famotidine 1 mg per kg per day. Coming to proton pump inhibitors, these provide the most potent anti-reflex effects by blocking proton pump that performs the final step in acid secretory process. It inhibits both basal and stimulated secretions. PPS are superior to H2 blockers. They maintain intragastric pH at or above 4 pH for longer periods of time, and they inhibit meal-induced acid secretion also. There is a limited pediatric data about the pediatric potential complications like headache, diarrhea, respiratory infections, bone fractures, hypomagnesemia, and kidney damage. So the usual dose of PPIs will be omeprazole 1 to 4 mg per kg per day, lansoprazole 2 mg per kg per day, esomeprazole for less than 20 kg 10 mg per day, and more than 20 kg 20 mg per day, and pantoprazole 1 to 2 mg per kg per day. Maximum dose is 40 mg. The prokinetic agents which are used most commonly like metoclopramide, domperidone, baclofen, erythromycin. These are the most of these increases LES pressure and some improve gastric emptying or esophageal clearance, but none affects the frequency of transient LES relaxations. These are not much of efficacy in GERD treatment, and the standard recommendations don't advise prokinetic agents. So the recommendations taken from Esfagan and Nasfagan, they recommend use of proton pump inhibitors as first-line treatment of reflux related to esophagitis in infants, and use of H2 blockers if PPIs are not available or contraindicated, and not to use proton pump inhibitors or H2 blockers for the treatment of crying or distress in otherwise healthy baby, and not to use PPIs or H2 blockers in patients with extraesophageal symptoms except in presence of a typical GERD symptoms. So now, after taking history, which is suggestive.
Yes, hello, Vinay. In the previous slide,
yes, sir.
So this thing is that the message is that not to use PPI and H2 receptor antagonist in patient with extraesophageal symptoms, which
Yes,
are
sir.
not from the GR. Though
Yes, sir.
those extraesophageal symptoms because of the GR, then it has to be used.
Yes, sir. In case of after when there are presence of GERD with extraesophageal symptoms, then we have to use PPIs. Otherwise, we should not use.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir. So after taking history, which is suggestive of GER, initially we have to do dietary changes and positioning changes for 2 to 4 weeks. If there is improvement, continue dietary and positioning changes. If there is no improvement, you start empirical trial of acid suppression for 4 weeks. After acid suppression, if there is improvement, continue acid suppression for 8 to 12 weeks. And if there is no improvement, consider other diagnostic studies for other causes for pathological GERD. So, other diagnostic studies are like upper GI contrast study, which is most commonly performed, which is screening test, but it has poor sensitivity and specificity in the diagnosis of GERD, pathological GER. There is an inability to differentiate physiological GER from pathological GER. It neither assesses mucosal inflammation nor correlates with severe GER. Endoscopy and biopsy. Normally, there is a redness of the distal esophagus in young infants because of the increased number of small blood vessels at cardiac region. The endoscopy is a invasive procedure. The during endoscopy, when there is a macroscopic lesions like erosions, ulcers, strictures, and hiatal hernia, which is suggestive of GERD, the mucosal damage does not always determine the severity of GERD at this stage. So there is insufficient evidence to support the endoscopy and histology to diagnose or exclude GERD. Coming to extended pH monitoring, earlier this extended pH monitoring was considered as gold standard method to diagnose GER, but not now. It provides a quantitative and sensitive documentation of acidic reflux episodes. Usually the distal esophageal probe is placed at an LES level, usually at T9 level. The normal values of distal esophageal exposure pH less than 4 are generally established as less than 5 to 8% of total monitored time. These quantitative normals are insufficient to establish or disprove the diagnosis of pathological GERD. So the indication for pH monitoring is to assess the efficacy of acid suppression during the treatment or evaluating atypical GERD like in case of chronic cough, stridor or asthma. There is one more method of pH monitoring in the dual pH probes, where the probes are kept at proximal and distal, that is upper esophageal sphincter and lower esophageal sphincter. Here the diagnosis of extraesophageal GERD can be done, identifying the upper esophageal acid exposure times of 1% of the total time as threshold values for abnormality. Coming to one more method, the multiple intraluminal impedance measurement coupled with pH monitoring. It detects the reflex episodes based on the changes in electrical resistance to the flow of electrical current between two electrodes on the probe. Here they keep multiple rings of impedance and along with the pH probe. These rings can be placed around 1 to 2 centimeter apart. The pH monitoring with impedance detects reflex regardless of its pH, like acidic, alkaline, or weak acidic. It distinguishes between swallows from the GR, like antegrade flow of the food or retrograde flow. It also detects accurately the height of the reflux weight. It detects type of the food, consistency of the fluid, and reflux. And it also detects the reflex weight clearance time. So the indications for impedance is it differentiates patients with non-erosive reflux disease, hypersensitive esophagus, and functional heartburn in patients with normal endoscopy. It also determines the efficacy of suppression therapy, acid suppression therapy, and it correlates persistent troublesome symptoms with acid and non-acid GE reflux. Laryngotracheobronchoscopy, it evaluates extraesophageal GERD like posterior laryngeal inflammation, vocal cord nodules, and granular pharyngitis. The diagnosis, it helps in diagnosis of silent aspiration. There is quantification of lipid-laden macrophages and detection of pepsin markers, which are the markers of reflux. Coming to indications for surgery, in case of failure of the medical management, the indications for surgery are like life-threatening complications like cardiorespiratory failure, chronic pulmonary conditions. These life complications of GERD after failure of optimal medical management. The symptoms refractory to optimal therapy, that means more than 12 weeks after appropriate evaluation to exclude other underlying diseases, and chronic conditions like neurologically impaired patients with significant risk of GERD related complications. and need for chronic pharmacotherapy for control of signs and symptoms of GERD. The most commonly done procedure is fundoplication for GER. It decreases reflux by increasing the LES baseline pressure, by decreasing the number of transient LES relaxations. It increases the length of the intra-abdominal esophagus. It accentuates the angle of his and reducing the hiatal hernia if present. So the commonly done fundoplication is Nissan's 360-degree complete wrap, and other partial fundoplications are like Thal 270-degree anterior fundoplication and Topet's 270-degree posterior fundoplications. So these anti-reflex surgeries in children are good, have overall good success with relief of GERD symptoms, but with minimal side effects like gas bloat, early satiety or pain, dysphagia, retching, worsening of aspiration risk from the esophageal stasis, and sometimes there will be wrap stippling and unwrapping, resulting in need for reoperation. Post-operative dysphagia, there will be less frequent after partial fundoplication. In around 15 to 40% of the cases, there will be recurrence of the reflex because of the recurrence of the reflex, and there will be wrap herniation and loosening of the fundoplication. In few cases, there will be severe consequences of GER which have already been outgrown, and in others, reduplication is attempted. Chronic PPIs are indicated in such cases. In special conditions like esophageal atresia with tracheoesophageal fistula, they require anti-reflux surgeries quite often, but surgeries is very difficult in such cases because the esophagus is shorter, fundus is small, angle of His is obtuse or non-existing, and gastrostomy might be present at the site or required during surgery. So the partial fundoplications are preferred in such cases. In post-CDS repair, they rarely require anti-reflux surgeries, but indications in CDS after CDS repair are large defects. A complete loose fundoplication is preferred by most of the time after lengthening of the intra-abdominal esophagus, and Nissan's fundoplication is preferred in most of the cases. The need of concurrent gastrostomy. In case of esophageal atresia after CDS repair and anterior abdominal wall defects, which helps in correction of the malnutrition, but it also facilitates reflux by itself. Both fundoplication and gastrostomy procedures can be performed during same anesthesia, but there is a little evidence of rationale for this attitude. Coming to total esophagogastric disconnection, this is the alternative surgical procedure in resistant GERD cases. It is a rescue procedure for neurologically impaired children with failed fundoplication. There is with these neurologically impaired patients which are completely dependent on tube feeds can go ahead with esophagogastric disconnection. Here we do the permanently eliminates GERD by transecting esophagus from the stomach and esophagojejunal anastomosis, biliopancreatic limb anastomose to the jejunal loop. For the nutrition, gastrostomy will be advised. Gastrostomy for feeding. So take home message is the physiological GER is most common. It can be managed with dietary changes, positioning measures, and thickening of the feeds. The pharmacological treatment advised in symptomatic patients, and the PPIs are the most potent anti-reflux agents. Avoid invasive procedures as much as possible. The multiple intraluminal impedance along with pH is better compared to PS monitoring alone. In case of failure of medical management, fundoplication is the surgical treatment of choice. Thank you, sir.
Vinay, it was a good presentation. So
Thank you,
there is good amount of the issues you discussed.
Yes, sir.
and take home message is good. My question is, what is the incidence of GR in, say, we are looking at the risk groups. The risk groups, what you're looking at from surgical point of view, is the CDH and TEF repair, and then other, like say, diaphragmatic hernia patients.
Yes,
So
sir.
the risk groups in medical patients also we looked into, like say those patients who require neonatal respiratory issues, requiring ventilation and tube feeds and all those things. Excluding
Yes, sir.
these, do we have
Yes, sir.
data of patients who the newborn GRs where they're only coming with say spitting and all those things? What is the data says? What is the percentage of newborns who have this reflux apart from the special groups?
Sir, they say normally up to more than one third of the normal newborns only they present with this physiological GER, sir.
So they seek attention, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So they
No, sir.
have this.
In one third of the patient, around one fifth of the patients take medical advice, sir.
Okay, they come to, but
Yes, sir.
okay. So they one third of them require some sort of a pathological GR problem. They come to medical evaluation.
No, sir. Around one third of the patients they present with GER, physiological GER. In one third of the patients, around one fifth present take medical opinion, but very few they present with GERD, sir. That
Okay.
pathological GER percentage, the
No, no.
incidence.
So you're telling one fifth of the patients will have GR. Out of that, one third will be having GR.
Yes, sir.
One fifth of that one third will ask for a medical attention.
Take
Is
take
that?
medical advice.
So that one third means it's like say 30%,
Yes, sir.
33%.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a very high, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, that apart. Other question is, especially in CDH repair,
Yes, sir.
do you have any data to say that some patients may require prophylactic anti-reflux procedure during the CDH repair?
Sir, in case of patients with hypoplastic lung with large defects, those who are managed with ECMO and very large defects, they help. It will help with anti-GR measures, sir, surgeries.
Prophylactic.
Yes, sir.
In the sense, during the time of your primary surgery, you can add the GR surgery also.
Yes,
During
sir.
the
In case
CDH
of
repair,
very hypoplastic lungs and very large defects after the treatment of CDH, sir.
no.
Yes, sir.
During the same surgery, CDH surgery plus GR surgery together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Yes, sir.
those subgroups which are large defects, those
Yes,
who are
sir.
requiring ECMO,
Yes, sir.
and these are the patients are they requiring the like say patch grafts may
Yes, sir.
help because 70 to 80% of them may end up in GR.
Yes.
And so in those situations, you might add primary anti-reflux surgery in them. That's what you're telling.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any guidelines for that, or is it some papers published?
So only that in recommendations I saw it, sir. That Nespegan and Espegan
Okay. They recommend and
recommendation.
primary surgery during repair of CDH repair itself.
Yes, sir. Very large this one. Sir,
Okay.
meeting will end in 2 minutes, sir. If
I
it
think. Any other questions? Anybody now? I think Ramchandran sir is. He's joined. Sir, Ramchandran sir.
No, I did not hear most of the lecture, so I was
Yes,
busy
sir.
with my car battery change mechanic had come. I had to go
Oh,
down
okay.
and
Okay, sir.
so
Okay,
I
sir.
got it. So just wanted to know if we differentiated between GERD and GER. That is very important. And then whether any discussion was made about SIDS. Those are the two things I wanted to ask. That's all.
uh,
GERD versus GER and
sir.
SIDS.
Yes, sir. Sir, GER is a physiological phenomenon, sir. It is most commonly seen. This neonates will present with restlessness, nocturnal
See,
crying.
important thing in physiological GR is weight gain is the important thing. Okay?
Yes, yes, sir.
Weight gain is the important thing, and these kids who have pathological GR will have this irritability, which is a common symptom. It is both due to the sort of subclinical esophagitis they have, and also
Yes,
because
sir.
of hunger. Not
Okay, sir.
exactly it is due to hunger, but it is more of a subtle esophagitis they have. The other
Yes,
important
sir.
thing which you see in pyloric stenosis, the same thing will be seen in GER. If
GR.
it is going from physiological to pathological, they'll start developing constipation.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So
Sir.
when there is no constipation, when there is no
Sir.
irritability, even if the child is spitting and throwing up and weight gain is there, the child is comfortably sleeping otherwise and feeding well, then it is called as physiological GR. And physiological
Okay, sir.
GR generally is not treated with medications. Just you give probably Domstal or something like that, but you don't usually give them PPI and all that.
Yes,
Correct,
sir.
na?
Yes, sir. Only dietary changes and positioning measures are advised.
Yeah.
Sir, in sudden infant death syndrome, sir, it is a sudden unexplained death of the baby less than 1 year usually. It is seen most commonly seen in babies which who sleep on the baby this one tummy, sir, stomach,
Correct.
and overheating while sleeping, and babies who sleep on soft surfaces, sir,
Yeah.
and mothers who smoke. The cause is in most of the cases it is unknown, but few theories they say when baby sleeps on face down position, there may be rebreathe of exhaled carbon dioxide. So normally when there is a increase in the carbon dioxide which activates the nerve cells in the brain, and there will be stimulation of the arousal centers, and baby will change the position. But in SIDS, these children they will not be aroused, so there will be hypercarbia and sudden death, sir.
Yeah. So previously, reflux was considered as one of the important causes. Now it
Yes,
is
sir.
considered to be a very, very minor contributor to SIDS.
Yes,
And the most important thing is they have a developmental abnormality in their brainstem. That is, which is seen in majority of the infants anyway. So it is an immature brainstem which does not respond to, as you said, a little bit of
hypercarbia.
apnea and little bit of just upper limit of normal carbon dioxide buildup. They don't respond to
Yes,
that. So that
yes,
is
sir.
why they go into vicious cycle of more and more apnea, hypercarbia, and then they will succumb before even alarms are not supposed to help in children with SIDS.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
It is mainly seen in the Western civilization where very, very early children are left to sleep on their own. Small babies are left to sleep on their own. They have these
Okay,
various
sir.
gadgets like a alarm and like a camera and all that. But they
Yes,
have
sir.
found that these things do not work well even with all these gadgets.
Okay, sir.
Sir, hello, sir.
Yeah.
I think, thank you, sir. Thank you for input, sir. Last
That
question I asked.
another
Yeah.
thing about fundus is that it acts as a pop-off valve. So that is a very important thing. So that is usually preserved in case of all the fundoplications. You preserve the pop-off valve function of the fundus. It is least preserved in the complete Nissen. So in all other fundoplications, the unfurling of the fundus, which occurs during increased retching and intra-abdominal pressure, unfurling of the fundus, which acts as a pop-off valve. That's an important physiological action of the fundus.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, Narendra, you wanted to tell something?
Nothing, sir. So the other question I asked him is that the role for a prophylactic anti-GI surgery during CDH repair. So now that NASPAN and SPAN guidelines, they say that the large defects and babies who are already on ECMO, so there are more than 70 to 80% chance of having a pathological GR in them. So some of the recommendations say about doing on the same sitting of CDH repair, you add a fundoplication to that. There are some articles also. That's what the recommendation also. That's what he was telling us.
Okay. And the various surgical techniques, just show that slide.
Sir,
Okay, Nissan and Topaz. Okay, fine. Right.
so they have written in few cases only anterior gastropexy is also more than enough, sir. But actual recommendation says Nissan's fundoplication is better. Sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which are the children who have a lot of retching? See, generally the neurological impact children, they have
Sir.
lot of retching. So in them, you have to do either a loose Nissen or a anterior thal or something like that. Because they are the ones who will have so much retching that the entire thing will migrate into the thorax. And it becomes
Okay.
more severe when you do a tight Nissen in them. But sometimes you will have to balance both, aspiration as well as this thing. Aspiration prevention is better with the complete Nissen, like a 360-degree Nissen, as you are depicted here.
Okay, sir.
But if there is a esophageal dysmotility, again, that will be a problem with a 360-degree Nissen.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anything else, Narendra, you want to say?
Sir, yeah. Hello, sir.
Yeah, just the
Sir, your
the type
voice
of
not
surgery.
audible, sir. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir, audible, sir.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say that in neurologically impaired children, there will
The
be
other
a
thing
lot
he
of
described
retching.
is, sir,
Okay, sir.
Yeah,
Hello.
Narendra, you are saying something.
hello.
Yeah, Narendra,
Yes, sir.
say.
So that's what neurologically impaired children. One is, sir, neurologically impaired children. There's a more chance of this fundoplications failure. To prevent aspiration episodes, recommendation is to do 360-degree fundoplication. Maybe also had a gastrostomy because some of them will not have a proper feeding. They may have esophageal dysmotility also. So they may have a gastrostomy also. That's what. I couldn't hear what exactly told. So that's the reason I just telling that.
No, some people feel that 360-degree Nissen will migrate into the thorax in a neurologically impaired child because of the severe retching which occurs in them. So that's why some people recommend thal or toupee in them, neurologically impaired children. And that's what I have seen in some papers. Maybe there is a consensus now. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll read up and we will confirm.
And also in those, exactly, sir. You told is right, sir. But there's a since there is yes, sir. Exactly, sir. Yeah. Vinay, what is this thing in neurological children? What is the recommendations?
Sir, neurologically impaired patients also. Hello, sir. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Recommendations, sir. I went through again, sir. In neurologically impaired patients also, they go ahead with 360-degree fundoplication. They say, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
Fine.
Ha, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And the other
as
thing
sir said,
about
as
is the routinely they recommend.
ha, sir. Routinely it is recommended. So there are more chances of failure of fundoplication, sir. So even there is a even after fundoplication there is a GERD symptoms. They say we can go ahead with total esophagogastric disconnection, sir.
Okay. I think, sir, it looks little very little more complex surgery for a small baby. But I think, as sir has said, there is the 40%, 50% chance of failure rates. In those situations, definitely this might help some good outcomes.
Yes, sir.
Sir, if there is no further discussion, we can end the meeting, sir.
Yeah. We can end the meeting. Yeah.